Sound check 2, Public Works, January 16th. Sound check 2, Public Works, January 16th. That sound check was successful. Thank you very much.
Colleagues, if we could be seated, we are at the time and we do have quorum. So welcome everyone to the Public Works Committee for this January 16th, 2023. Before we go any further, I did want to take a moment of chair's privilege to just acknowledge Edward Zaldo, who's the chief road official who's leaving the city of Hamilton to take on a new and exciting challenge with the municipality of Chatham-Kent. Today is his official last day. And I do want to recognize that he began with the city of Hamilton in July 2018 and not only brought passion, but also a national standard of excellence and award-winning to quality management, asset management, and roadway safety. And just want to take a moment to acknowledge that and thank him for his service, as well as aiding this corporation in positioning our transportation operations maintenance division, public works and roads initiatives squarely within Vision Zero and complete street standards. So thank you, Edward, and all the best to you. Okay, so moving along, if I could please get a mover and seconder to, no, wait, hold on. Before that, before we approve the agenda, Madam Clerk, any changes to it?
Madam Chair, there is one change to the agenda. Item number 6, delegation requests. 6.1, Lindsay Mordew respecting downtown traffic conditions and two-way.
And that will require electronic vote. Did I'm just having a glitch with the voting. It's not coming through all the way, so yeah, just bear with us for a second, folks. We will always resort to active thumbs if needed. Okay. We're checking our stream. Audio's working, but video appears to be down. Since the vote is still open, both Councillor Spatafora, Councillor Pauls, we're just approving the agenda. So, oh, you got it in? Excellent. Excellent. Thank you. We just lost our live streaming feed, so we're just waiting for a quick tech glitch on that one to fix. Confirmation. Mr. McMeekin, the vote to approve the agenda is still technically open. Okay, we are back live streaming with video and audio, and the result of approving the agenda is it carries. Awesome. All right. Moving on to declarations of interest, colleagues. Any declarations, either disqualifying or non-disqualifying, to declare at this time? Seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the minutes from the previous meeting, which was held on November 28th. Mover and seconder, please put the minutes on the table. Councillor Pauls, Councillor McMeekin, thank you both. Any discussion? Seeing none, colleagues, an electronic vote to approve the minutes. Manual approval from Councillor Jackson. The results of the vote. We got a manual thumbs up confirmation from Jackson, M. Wilson, and Councillor Spatafora. And it carries. Thank you. Riveting stuff right now. Delegation request 6.1. We have Lindsay Mardu respecting downtown traffic conditions and two-way streets for today's meeting. Please have a mover and seconder to approve the delegation request for today's meeting. Moved by Councillor Spatafora, seconded by Councillor A. Wilson. Thank you. And please vote to approve the delegation request. Manual affirmation vote from Councillor Jackson. And that carries. Thank you. Moving forward to delegations. Members are reminded that questions of the delegations are for clarification purposes only and not for debate. Is Lindsay Mardu joining us virtually? Yes, thank you. I'd like to call upon Lindsay to delegate respecting Bayfront Park Transit Service Extension. Lindsay, if you could please turn on your video and audio and just do a quick hello so we can test it. Can't see you at this time, so.
Hey, am I here? Am I on? Am I on?
Loud and clear, and video as well. So you have 5 minutes. Please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you so much, counselors and committee members. I am a mother of 2 small children commuting to the city from the county of Brant for the last 7 years. I've loved my drive into work up until now for the last 7 years. The congestion caused by the changes made to Main Street and King Street have changed a lot of things in terms of my commute. The bus lane on King Street has created somewhat of a dangerous situation, and I see accidents happen almost daily. There are many businesses and side streets which require access from the far right lane. So people are having to cut over last minute from an active lane of travel, causing danger and delay to other drivers. The King Street Dundurn intersection specifically is honestly terrifying at this point. The intersection itself is a very busy and large intersection with lots of pedestrians and vehicles going in multiple directions, along with businesses and parking lots and the gas station. By not allowing people to ride in that right lane, they're forced to change lanes at the last minute and cut in front of a bus or other drivers attempting to go into the gas station or the 403 eastbound ramp. So it's just basically where you're trying to watch for drivers, you're trying to watch for pedestrians, there's cars going in and out of lanes. It's basically created utter chaos at this point, and I feel unsafe driving through that intersection every day. I understand that there's changes being made to make the roads safer. As someone who drives these corridors on a daily basis, I can assure you it has not improved the overall safety, as people are using dangerous moves to deal with the traffic conditions. People are driving like maniacs to try to get around the lane restrictions, swinging swinging in and out of lanes, cutting people off. It just feels very dangerous at this point for other drivers and for pedestrians. It's basically a parking lot along King Street. And I only leave at 4 o'clock p.m., so it's not even prime time traffic time. I drive from McNabb to 403, so it's not even a long stretch. The priority signal for transit, the advanced walk for pedestrians, no right on reds, I think those are great additions, and I think they're working wonderfully. But the other changes have made life on the commuters on these corridors a complete nightmare. I understand that you've also tried to do the bus lanes before in another part of King Street, which were subsequently removed. Um, I have read the proposal for the conversion to 2 lanes. At this point, I'm unsure whether it will be a better solution. I mean, I guess time will tell. But I do know that constantly changing the roadways is very confusing to people, especially who don't drive on a regular basis. So the confusion can lead to incorrect moves, potentially causing accidents. I would just ask that you ask the people of Hamilton how they feel about these changes and get answers and opinions from people who drive these corridors. As I've spoken to other people who commute, and they agree with my statements in that it has changed dramatically and increased travel time and frustration. So I would ask to open a public forum where people can make comments or take a poll. As I assure you, these issues I'm not the only one dealing with these issues on a daily basis. So thank you for your time and listening to my comments. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay, for joining us this afternoon for Public Works Committee and for your delegation. Colleagues, any councillors for the delegate at this time? Okay, speakers list, we have Councillor Pauls. And just a reminder to colleagues that the speakers list is always open on WebEx. Thank you. Councillor Pauls, please
Thank
go
you,
ahead.
Lindsay, and I hear your frustration. I have quite a few people that told me, even in my ward, they were surprised when they went downtown and almost got in an accident when there was no more lane and you can go in front of the bus. And so I thought, oh, I haven't been, I'll go and check it out. And I was confused as well. I'm just wondering, Lindsay, did you get notification? How did you know this change was going to happen?
Thank you.
I found out when I drove on the road. The abutments that happened slowly along Main Street, I noticed those. Those aren't as big of an issue as the bus lane on King Street. But yeah, I just noticed it when I started driving, and eventually, day by day, things just changed. And slowly but surely, now they've inputted finalization on these plans. So I didn't have no prior knowledge.
So
Thank you for the response, Lindsay. Councillor.
Thank you. And Lindsay, how much longer does it take you now to go home?
I would say that it's increased my travel time just from McNabb to 403, 10 minutes.
10
On a
minutes.
good day. On a good day. I'm basically getting stopped at almost every single light now. It was more, I used to coast at, the 50, and I was able to kind of cruise. And now it's like every single light I'm stopped, and it's increased frustration on my part because I'm trying to get home to my family.
Exactly. Also, I'm just wondering, we're in climate change, and I'm wondering what your thought is about, maybe staff should answer that. When cars are
Councillor,
stopped,
we're right now in delegation questions. So
delegation.
if you have questions for staff, just let me know and I'll make that happen for you.
okay, maybe I'll ask staff that question about the constant stopping and going slower, what it does to our environment. So thank you for delegating. And I hear your frustration, because I want to tell you, when I went door to door, people were saying, what's happening? What's going on with all changes? So people want to know if it's a good thing. We're here to change it, of course, but we need to know the study. We need to know what's going to happen, and people need to know. You just don't go and drive, and all of a sudden there's a
Councillor,
change.
any other questions for
So
the
thank
delegate?
you. Thank you, Lindsay.
And I don't
Thank
mean
you.
to
No
cut off.
problem.
We're not in a moment of debate, so thank you. Any other questions for the delegate? Seeing none, thank you again, Lindsay, for joining us today. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive the delegation? Moved by Councillor Paul, seconded by Councillor Beattie. Thank you both. An electronic vote, please. And that carries. Thank you. And Councillor, I'll add your agenda item at the end for your questions to staff. Moving on to consent items, we have 9.1, Accessible Transportation Services Performance Report, PW 22079A. We have Director of Transit, Maureen Cozenheath, who will introduce the report.
Good afternoon, Maureen Cozenheath, Director of Transit. Through you, Chair. Before you today is an information report. The Accessible Transportation Services has been providing quarterly performance updates to the Advisory of Persons with Disabilities for many years. In April of 22, staff were directed to report to PW on a quarterly basis regarding these stats. The first such report was presented to the committee in September of 22, and the second report is before you today. The report reflects the performance of specialized transit offered by ATS through its contractor and that of their subcontractors. ATS is obliged to provide these comments under an OHRC tribunal ruling, which sets out standards for trip denial rates and on-time performance, and obliges us to provide an annual report on a variety of statistics. Our quarterly report presents more statistics on a more frequent basis than what is required to meet the terms of the tribunal ruling. And the fourth quarter stats in 22 are being compiled presently and will be presented to the ACPD in the near future, and then will come before this committee at a later date.
Thank you for that overview, Director. May I please have a mover and seconder to receive the item, and it opens us up for discussion. Councillor Spatafora, seconded by Councillor A. Wilson. Thank you. Any comments, questions on the report speakers list? I see Councillor Cratch.
Thank you. Thanks for this report. I read it. It was my first time reading this report. And before we got to the appendice where you actually had the data and the stats and the report itself, there's a section that says this was brought to ACPD sometime in 2022 to have a look at. I guess what I'm wondering, and I didn't see this captured, if I missed it, I apologize, is where the comments from ACPD fall into. So I know you bring it to them, they review it at their meeting at the advisory committee. Then do you bring their comments here for us to review? How do we get access to what the advisory committee had to say about this?
Through you, Chair. The advisory committee, when the report is taken by staff, are provided an opportunity to ask questions of staff, and staff respond to the questions in those meetings. And then if there was anything from that committee that they wanted to make a motion on, they would bring that forward through their committee work.
So if I understand correctly, the feedback that we get from ACPD isn't captured in the report to council. Is there a way to do that? Would it require a motion? I think it'd be beneficial for us to have that information captured here so we can see not only the context for the data you're providing, but also what ACPD has to say about it in case there are things we want to bring up. I get that they can make a motion, but having been on an advisory committee before, it's not always super easy to do.
So just to seek clarity, Councillor, then are you seeking a summary of the discussion at the advisory committee to be integrated into a staff report on the topic?
Well, just to be provided like a process, I guess, right? So them knowing they can provide feedback, and then the feedback will be shared with us through this report, because having those show up in two different places, as it would be if there was a motion, makes it hard for us to track. If it all comes together in this one central place and can form part of your quarterly reporting, then we can look at it all together and synthetically understand what's happening, right? It's a little more difficult for us to kind of figure out where in the ACPD universe they may have made comments and try to go back to them, because those meetings are no longer live streamed. Does that make sense?
Thank you. I'm clear on the question. Anyone want to respond from staff? General Manager Khan?
Through the chair to the councillor, Carlisle Can, General Manager of Public Works. The committee itself is, they capture the minutes and the motions, and then they provide direction through this committee to council, to committee members and council. So I think most of what you may be looking for may be in the minutes from the committee.
Councillor?
Okay, I'll follow up with this offline. It's more about me wanting to introduce a process so that the information can be together. That's all. I'm sure it exists separately, but for the benefit of Public Works, when we're reviewing this data, It'd be good to have the actual feedback from ECPD, who the report was presented to. So I'll just put a motion together offline and do that. I did have a question about the actual data itself. I noticed that a lot of this comes out of that 95-5 split that you talk about in the report, about making sure that we meet the demand. And it seems like, based on the reporting, we met those measures. But of course, this reporting details a lot more than that. And in some areas, we're not meeting the median, or we're not meeting the standard. When we're not meeting the standard, what do we do in those cases to remedy that exactly? Just for my education.
Through you, Chair. The standards that are established are either established by the tribunal or in some cases are established sort of by best practices in the industry. When trip demands cannot be made, which is a sort of constant balance when it comes to requests for specialized service, we take a look at how many vehicles are on the road, the size of the vehicles that are on the road, the frequency of the service, and do our best. Certainly through this reporting period, there were a number of vehicles that were unavailable for service as a result of the Office of the City Auditor's work on vehicle safety standards. So we always have to look at our stats in the context of the time in which they are reported in. And we're always seeking improvement to make more service available for ATS members who require booking trips.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thanks, appreciate it.
Great. Nobody else is indicated on the speakers list, so it is duly moved and seconded for committee to receive. And that carries 12-0. Thank you. Moving forward on the agenda, it's discussion items 11.1, 2023 Volunteer Committee Budget for Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee, PW 23002. Please have a mover and seconder to put it on the agenda. Councillor Jackson, thank you. Councillor, there was a hand over here somewhere. Pauls, thank you. My apologies. Director of Environmental Services, Cynthia Graham's available to provide an overview to the report. Thank you.
Thank you. Through the chair, I'm Cynthia Graham, Acting Director of Environmental Services. So this report outlines the budget ask for 2023 to be referred to the operating budget for consideration. As a bit of background, the Keep Hamilton Clean and Green Committee is a citizen volunteer committee that has work plan goals to help keep Hamilton both cleaner and greener. The goals include addressing litter in the community, mitigating illegal dumping, cleaning and preventing illegal or unwanted graffiti, promoting neighborhood beautification, and fostering environmental stewardship. The volunteer committee budget request is for $18,250 to help achieve the goals that were listed. The programs that this committee oversees, including the Team Up to Clean Up program, which provides resources to volunteers to clean up our public spaces, graffiti management strategy to provide support to reduce and deter illegal tagging and graffiti, and the Clean and Green Neighborhood Grants, which provide funds for local cleanups and projects such as renting a bin or beautification project. The committee has been in existence since 2001, and the requested budget amount has remained unchanged since 2007.
Thank you for that overview, and I did request for those kinds of overviews given that first round of committees and 10 new councillors around the table. So it's been duly moved and seconded. Any questions or comments? I see Councillor Wilson. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through the chair, happy to take any insight from staff or clerks if these questions are better suited perhaps to the capital budget with respect to waste. I am just curious, do we know as a city how much we spend on litter cleanup outside of regular pickup? Through the chair.
Thank you.
Through the chair, I think that there would be a few different groups that would contribute to that number, and so we can put our heads together and get back to committee with the number.
Counselor?
Thank you very much. If I could ask maybe a secondary question to that collection of groups to perhaps assist this community of how our pickup of litter is informed by density and some of the public health data that we received this morning. So income, density, access to green space. I'm just wondering whether our collection and litter activity is informed by our geography. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone on staff team?
Through the chair, we can include that as part of our analysis.
Thank you. Counselor?
Thank you, Chair. I know that there are certain areas of across the city who have more encampments, for example, in them than others. And so I'm wanting to know, I'm just trying to understand our waste collection practices and how they're informed by, what's going on in our neighborhoods and some of the challenges and opportunities. So that's the reason for my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. So it's been moved and seconded. Nobody else is on the speakers list, so it's before committee to approve. Hang on, I didn't submit it yet, so the vote isn't taken. Counselor Wilson?
Thank you. My apologies to my colleagues and to the chair. As has been the habit thus far in this term of council, if I could ask clerks or staff whether they would prefer my questions to be in the form of a motion or is
Thank
the
you,
preference
Counselor.
as suited?
Yeah, for seeking that clarity. It would be appropriate, as we heard from City Manager Smith, to have requests for reports and information trackable on the outstanding business list. So I will say I'll come back to you at that portion of the agenda to bring forward a motion for that request, which seemed quite doable.
Thank you.
From staff. Fair? Okay. So submit your votes, folks, to approve the committee budget. Is that correct? And that carries 12-0. Thank you, committee. Moving on to 11.2, funds required to award tender C15-01-22 for Mountain Brow Trail Initiative Number 4, PW Report 23003 for Ward 14. Again, we do have Acting Director of Environmental Services, Cynthia Graham, to provide an overview. And then if I could just ID a mover and seconder so we can open up into discussion if needed afterwards. Councillor Spadafora, second by Councillor Beattie. Thank you. Go ahead, Director.
Thanks to the chair, Acting Director of Environmental Services, Cynthia Graham. So through this report, staff are requesting the movement of funds to award the Mountain Brow Trail Initiative Number 4 tender, which closed over our available funds. The Mountain Brow Trail Number 4 links Scenic Drive to Sanatorium Road along the escarpment brow in Ward 14. This is part of a larger Mountain Brow Trail master plan to establish a multi-use connection across the escarpment lands in Wards 14, 8, 7, 6, and 9, moving from west to east. The reasons contributing to the shortfall of funding include the requirement to perform work largely by hand and not machined for the excavation and creation of the path, cost increases associated with materials and labor in the past year, and an increase in cost and work associated with the excess soils legislation requirements which were not captured when this project was costed. The report recommends a funding source which finance staff have reviewed and approved for eligibility from an existing project to design and construct a trail connection along the Hydro Corridor on Ward 7 at Lime Ridge Mall to Rymel Road. That project is delayed while staff work with Hydro One on their design requirements and restrictions. When that When the Lime Ridge Trail project has a design that is approved by Hydro One and can be constructed, a future budget request will be brought forward for consideration at that time. In the meantime, the funds are sitting there unable to be used, so staff identified them as an existing funding source that would be better used for this trail project. And staff are here to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Jackson is on the speakers list. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Nan. Acting Director Graham, let's get one thing straight. You're not moving west to east with this project. You're moving east to west. So we'll just get that straight for the record, Chair Nan. It started in Ward 6. Anyways, I'm very supportive of this project continuing. Councillor Pauls and I can speak to the enormous popularity, Chair Nan. And if you all may have recalled being on the bus tour a couple of months ago when we drove across the Mountain Brow, Albion Falls, escarpment concession area, we pointed out, Councillor Pauls and I, the enormous amenities that are being used by thousands of residents and visitors to the prestigious, beautiful Mountain Brow concession mountain park area. And a lot of it was due to the public investment that came starting 5-6 years ago in my area, working with a citizens committee and city staff. And it's provided healthy, active living, connection with the stairs, going up and down the escarpments as well, because there's stairs across Councillor Spatafora's ward, over by Chateau, Councillor Paul's ward, over by Upper Wentworth, and mine, of course, over by Margate. This has just been a wonderful success story. This master plan that Acting Director Cynthia Graham, Chair Nan, and her entire talented team of architects and landscape employees have put together, and I can tell you the enormous buy-in from the community has been overwhelming and literally universal. So this is another part of the continuum, and although it's an increased amount of money, I think it's very valuable to be spent and a prudent, wise way to continue showing to all residents of our city and those that wish to explore the mountain park and Mountain Brow multi-use trails, that this is just a fabulous amenity to be proud of in our city. And I'm very strongly supportive. Thank you, Chair Nan.
Thank you, Councillor Jackson. Next up, we have Councillor Danko.
Thank you, Chairman Nan. So obviously, I'm very, very supportive. I think you're hearing that across the board. Just wondering what opportunities there might be to accelerate some of this work, as I believe it was originally envisioned as a 20-year project, but considering the support and I would say the need, in particular in Ward 8 with the connection from the top of the Ketty Access Trail to Sam Lawrence Park and Mohawk College and Hillfield Strathallan, opportunities to complete those connections ahead of schedule.
Thank you, Director.
Through the chair, so as part of our annual capital budget requests, we do identify priorities to be implemented. Sometimes the trail projects do take a little bit of time because of all of the studies that are required in order to proceed with them, including archaeological and geotechnical and natural environment. We are planning on doing an update to the Trails Master Plan this year in conjunction with the Transportation Master Plan, and those studies will help to prioritize initiatives throughout the city that we would put forward for funding and prioritization. So we can take that as a thought that people would like to see these projects move forward quickly and do see what we can to put forward a plan that would do that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. So Trails Master Plan coming. Councillor Paul's indicating to be on the speakers list. Thank you.
Thank you. And through the chair, I echo Councillor Jackson and Councillor Danko. Connectivity is paramount to the betterment of movement to all residents. And I think of for the mountain. So I think from Ward 6 right through 14, how important it is. So I agree, we need to move it forward and make sure we do connect the mountain. So if we want to see more people moving, if we want to see more people not driving, or you want to see more people biking, you want to see more people, continuing this, we need to do it now. So that's my opinion. So whatever we can do, I'm for it. Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. And Councillor Spatafora. you're up next.
Thank you, Chair. Director, I'm just going to comment. I know Hydro One is something, I don't know how it pertains to the other wards, but for Ward 14 has always been something that's going to be, I don't know if we want to call it a hurdle yet. But for me, right now, the Brow is a safety concern with some of the areas along Scenic. So again, if Hydro One, I think I've mentioned this offline to a few of staff, but if Hydro One, or if we're getting a bit of a stalling through that process, I'd appreciate if my office was kept up to date, because it's definitely something that can't be stalled over, you know, just two levels or two companies trying to figure out how to make this work when there's citizen safety at risk. So please, as soon as Hydro One looks like they're taking a bit too long, please advise my office. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that response from staff? Imagine it's a big yes. Thank you. As a Hydro One can be some coordination and alignment needed there. Okay, I'll just leave it there. Also really glad to hear all this support for connectivity is being really important across our neighborhoods coming from our mountain councillors. Love it. Awesome. Okay, any other speakers on the list? Seeing none, we will duly moved and seconded. Time to vote. Duly noted, Counselor, and duly noted notes. All your votes submitted. Make sure you hit the submit button. If it's not working, please indicate manually. Carried. Wonderful. Moving on to 11.3, the Truck Routes Bylaw Amendment, PW 23005. Director of Transportation Operations and Maintenance, Mike Field, will introduce the report. And just so I can flag it, a mover and seconder for the bylaw changes, Councillor Crutch, thank you, and Councillor Wilson. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you, Chair. Mike Field, Acting Director of Transportation Operations and Maintenance. This is the last piece of the truck route puzzle. Of course, the master plan was approved earlier in 2022. The report that's in front of you is the approval of the bylaw changes to the traffic bylaw 01215 that enables the implementation of the actual truck route changes through the installation and removal of signage. Approximately 600 to 700 signs are involved in this work to implement the new truck route. This work will happen over the winter and completed in the springtime around April. The changes will be made with a focus on downtowns first and then move into the rural areas afterwards. There's going to be a proactive communication plan that we're going to use to inform the public stakeholders in the trucking industry of the routes as they come online. They're going to be incremental. And then we've met with Hamilton Police Services as late as last Thursday to talk with them about collaborating on how this is going to be implemented, how it's going to be transitioned over to them as they can be effective in enforcing the new routes as they become active.
Thank you for that overview. Speakers list is open. Colleagues, Councillor Jackson, yeah.
Thank you, Chair Nan, and thank you, Elsie Bates. I'm sorry, I keep trying to click my microphone on and it won't come on here for the speakers list. Acting Director Field, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're in the leadership position you've been in, I think, for about a couple of years now as Acting Director. And this is going to be one massive assignment in transforming habits, primarily of the trucking industry, and specifically in the lower city. And of course, Chair Nan, as you know, last year before the end of that term of council, I was fully supportive of the revised truck route master plan. So through you to Acting Director Field, Mike, you're saying you're going to unfold this, implement it over the next 4 or 5 months. How are you going to, between yourself, traffic, police, the trucking industry, which quite frankly, Chair Nan, have been wanting and have disappointed me in the past in terms of obedience to the truck route signage over the years in our city and the lack of what I feel is cooperation from that industry. Acting Director, how are you planning to monitor over the next 4 or 5 months your implementation? Through you, Chair Nan, please.
Thank you, Director.
To the chair, to the councillor. That's a great question, and as these changes come into effect, people are going to have to adjust, particularly the trucking industry, to the new routes. We're focusing on the areas in the city which have had the most focus and the most interest for making those changes in the downtown core. Right now, we've issued a contract and awarded a contract to a vendor who's going to actually do the supply the signs and install the signs. So we're going to work with them as far as what the actual rollout and the plan is, and how that's going to look within the field, with input from them, so they can schedule that work appropriately. Once we have that a bit more clearer, which should be happening soon, then I made mention of conducting some proactive communications, and that is to let people know of the changes, but also to let the trucking industry know of when they need to make adjustments within their routes. So we're going to rely heavily on those types of communications, and of course utilize our partners in transportation planning with Brian Hollingsworth Group, with the connections that they've made through the the truck route master plan process, and use that as a conduit to inform those as well. And then the last piece of the puzzle is working closely with the Hamilton Police Services to make sure that they know when things are changing, when they know that the signage has been completed, so they can start enforcing the new routes. And last week with Hamilton Police Services, the traffic enforcement unit, we talked about informing them on a street-by-street basis as we convert route by route. And then that information will be available to them instantly. We even discussed sharing an active GIS map that updates in real time as we implement those routes.
Acting Director, you're doing your darndest to raise my comfort level, which I greatly appreciate. It'll be my lower city colleagues that I will look to as they receive feedback from within their communities and neighborhoods. Could I humbly suggest, Acting Director, unless you're already planning to do it, you said you want to hopefully have this unfolded and implemented by the next 4 or 5 months. Chair Nan, could I humbly suggest, Acting Director, could you maybe come back by the end of the second term, let's say no later than the end of June of this year, to give us some update on outcomes of how the master truck route revised plan has unfolded? Through you, Chair Nan, please.
Info report request, Director.
Through the chair, I do see that as part of the communication plan is regular updates to committee and council. As we progress through, I'm happy to return an information update once we're finished to kind of give the insight as to far as what happened, when it happened, and all of that sort of good information. I know Brian Hollingworth and his team, he has a plan in place to monitor the truck routes after they're put in place to determine and measure their effectiveness.
Acting Director Field, members of committee has always followed through without fail, so I'm satisfied with that. Thank you, Chair Nan.
Thank you, Councillor. Next up on the speakers list, we have Councillor A. Wilson, followed by Councillor M. Wilson. As Chair, I'm also on the speakers list. Just a heads up to Councillor Pauls as Vice Chair. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you. And through the chair, really excited to have this. I know it's been a long-standing conversation. I also can say that I can't get through a week without Ward 13 residents, particularly rural residents, with concerns about the impact of trucks, mostly relating to the quarries, but it's beyond that. And so I think just expanding this conversation from a specific geographic lens of our city, and as we have an integrated city, we need an integrated truck master plan. And so that kind of brings me to some of these questions is, in terms of enforcement and in terms of signage, as we implement the plan, is there funding within the implementation for increased signage? So for example, just last Friday, I was having a meeting with some folks on Middlebrook Road. That's not part of this truck master plan. It's not the official plan. It's a violation right now to drive a truck on that road. Trucks go there every day. When residents talk to truckers about why they're doing that, they say, this is the most efficient route. This is what my employer said I should do. And the employer said they'll pay the fine. They don't care. And so when there's that level of disregard, and again, this is like an anecdotal story, we got to do our investigation, but this is what residents feel, and this is the resident impact. Could you just walk us a little bit through what those signage, like what signage pieces might be part of implementation, or the enforcement approach, whether we're taking a softer kind of more, we'll work with you, or if we have a large company with many trucks, for example, how quickly do we escalate our enforcement in that situation? Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Through the chair to the councillor, thank you for the question. I'll start off with the question relating to enforcement is more suitable for Hamilton Police Services and the strategy that they'll use to enforce the new routes. So I'll leave that maybe as something that they can address. In terms of the signage, we're using a hybrid signage model for the truck routes, which are permissive and restrictive, but more permissive than restrictive. If we went purely restrictive, we have a sign on every road in the city. So with that, the signage plan that we're developing to support the changes is our best determination as far as where signs are going to be needed most effectively. But by no means are they static, because over time we find out that, there's problem areas or there needs to be supplemental signage to the base signage. And we add that over time. That's kind of natural for us on day-to-day business. So any requests for additional signage, we do review and whether or not that's effective or not, and then install signage. And that's covered through kind of our standard operating budget within transportation operations, just like any other traffic signage across the city.
Councillor?
Thanks. That's all my questions for right now. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Ward 1, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair Nan. For you to Mr. Field. Director, you mentioned there'll be, I thought you said a monitoring report or an evaluation forthcoming. And I believe when this matter was deliberated the last term of council, there was a motion that was put forward on how perhaps to include the community in the evaluation of the truck route plan. And perhaps if they see, because they're in their homes and we're not, if they see repeated patterns emerge, how can they perhaps record or submit those instances? If this is ringing a bell, if someone from staff, perhaps Mr. Hollingworth, could speak to where we are on that, or will that be part of the report coming forward? I think that Mr. Field referenced. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. And then, go ahead.
Through the chair, Brian Hollingworth, Director of Transportation Planning and Parking. As mentioned, our group did the truck route master plan. Councillor Wilson is correct in that there was a report on September 13th, 2022 to the truck route subcommittee and approved by Public Works, which outlined a comprehensive monitoring framework. That included a number of things, including collecting data on truck movements, looking at air quality, and also a public engagement program. And there was some budget assigned to that. We're going to be using Engage Hamilton. So that's kind of the broader picture. In terms of hotspots, the primary option is to call the aggressive vehicle driving hotline that Hamilton Police Services have, and then they will kind of monitor that and use that to influence their enforcement strategies. We're also looking at some sort of crowdsourcing option whereby people could kind of report things. We're still in the early stages of looking at that, but we think that that might be a useful tool as well.
Councillor?
Thank you very much. That's hopeful. To just refresh my colleagues, the truck route issue really took on a crowdsourcing element to it, as there were community members and neighborhood association members who were actually doing the counting of trucks and took a great interest. And I think they really raised our appreciation and level of awareness. And I didn't want to lose that interest and those on the ground eyes and ears. So just thank you for that assurance that will be part of what is forthcoming. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up on the speakers list, we have Councillor Crutch, followed by Councillor Beattie.
Thanks very much. And following on that, I was part of Truck Route Reboot, and I stood up in the cold and the hot counting trucks on these routes for a few years. So I think it is an important part of how we measure and push forward these discussions, and that they're part of the public record is a good thing. My question was really about the crowdsourcing bit that you started to talk about, Director Hollingworth, about what that looks like, because this to me seems like a possibility, right? Like, this is one of those binary bylaw things I always think about, right? Trucks are not allowed on this road, and then you see a truck on the road. Like, it's pretty clear that there's a violation of the bylaw. It's not like how fast was the truck going, or it's just like the truck exists on this road. That is bad. Don't do it. And so it seems like there is a real opportunity here to report those kinds of things and then follow up with those companies to say, hey, here's a fine for doing the thing you're not supposed to do. So in terms of that crowdsourcing element, what are you looking at doing? Is it going to be looking at an app? Like, where are you at on that journey? And like, what's a timeline for when we can expect to see something come back that's got a bit more, bit more to it?
Through the chair to Councillor Kretsch. As mentioned, we are admittedly in the early stages of that. Steve Malloy is on the line, Manager of Transportation Planning, who might have a little bit more to say. But there's different ways to approach it. You can't be so specific that it's an expectation by the public that the police shall go out there immediately and enforce it, but it would try and gather information on the locations, the types of vehicles, the companies, and then, as you mentioned, sort of an education process with some of those companies that are the repeat offenders.
Manager Malloy, did you have something you wanted to add in terms of the development?
Absolutely. Thank you. Steve Malloy, Manager Transportation Planning. And through the chair to the councillor, we are working with Hamilton Police Services to identify like what types of information would be helpful to them. I think they're part of our engagement strategy would be to engage the groups that we had part of the development of the plan to identify the information pieces of what's the most applicable to put into a crowdsourcing map. So essentially the map would become a heat map of enforcement hotspots where the Hamilton Police Services could then strategically do blitzes or identify issues to do one-off moment in time pictures. May or may not be helpful in terms of pursuit of prosecution, but certainly if there's a pattern that develops, that will give some direction to Hamilton Police Services to do some targeted enforcement and to hopefully curb that behavior. So that's something that we want to work with the community on, as well as Hamilton Police Services, and how we can create that platform, ideally through Engage Hamilton, and make it a useful information source that will help improve enforcement.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thanks for clarifying. That brings up a number of other questions for me. Primarily about this idea of enforcement, specifically that the design of the road is what's going to influence its use much more than the enforcement, and that the enforcement is going to capture a moment in time, right? So when folks are there, people will know. There's lots of evidence, anecdotal and otherwise, that level of enforcement isn't doing as much as we think it is. There's a perception perhaps around it, but in terms of its impact, actually. And so I don't quite understand the reason why. I sense in your comments you thought there might be an ineffectiveness around this idea of a resident or somebody taking a picture of a truck on a truck route and that not being maybe helpful. It may be from an education piece, but not from a bylaw intervention piece. Because it's my understanding that really what we're doing is implementing a bylaw here, right? We're saying, hey, as the City of Hamilton, we're instituting a bylaw. That bylaw says you can't drive trucks in certain places. And so enforcing that bylaw actually has nothing to do with the police. It's something that we could do here at the city on our own through that kind of binary enforcement of saying, again, like, there's a truck on the road, it's not supposed to be there, here's a picture of this truck, follow up on that. Other cities do this, so I'm kind of understanding where we are on that journey specifically.
Thank you. Either Manager Malloy or Director Hollingworth?
Go ahead, Steve.
So through the chair, certainly how we engineer roads and not requiring police to do enforcement is probably the best method to do that. In terms of, and maybe perhaps this is probably a better conversation offline of more specifics, but it could be a moment in time if it's a local delivery that maybe in that instance, it is something that they did deviate from a truck route because they're permitted to do so through the bylaw. In other instances, they may not be. So I think it becomes certainly administratively to find out like what's the right information. Is it the individual truck driver? If there's information available that's captured in that picture, if it's just a truck and there's no demarcations, it becomes a larger problem to do more investigations over that one vehicle. So I think it's capturing what information pieces that will be helpful. So there's certainly a lot of work that we have to work through of what those pieces of information are. and how we can communicate that to the community and have that dialogue to make sure that a tool that we do create is useful and applicable and is effective to the best of our ability.
Thank you. Councillor?
Thanks, that's really helpful. I appreciate that, Manager Malloy. I think what you're saying is that you're at the place where you're developing the criteria that would allow you to assess the usefulness of a tool like this, right? So that just the picture itself is not enough information for you. You'd still need more information to be able to discern whether or not it was a bylaw infraction. And so like, that's a piece of the puzzle. And then like, what other pieces of the puzzle do you need? And then once you have those all together, you're able to present it back to us. That's great. Thanks so much for being really clear about that. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Next up, we have Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Chair Nan, and through you, I'm relatively new to this process, and this is something that was initiated by the previous council, so I'm bringing myself up to speed. So I do apologize if I ask questions that seem like something that a first-term councillor would ask, but here we are. I'm going through the list and trying to, every time I read it, something else kind of points out. There are roads that appear to be strictly within the context of Ward 10. So I'm asking very granular questions based on my specific ward. Appear to be in industrialized areas that, and purely industrialized, there's no residential component, that are being removed from the truck route. So I'm trying to understand why. And what was the thinking that would go into removing roads in industrial areas from the truck route, particularly one that is a cul-de-sac. So there's no other entrance to the industrial buildings that are there, if not through that road. So through you, Chair, I'm wondering if we can get some insight.
Thank you. Over to Director Hollingworth.
I'll start off and then Steve can elaborate if I don't answer the question. We did do some cleanup as part of the truck route master plan. There was especially in kind of the lower east side of the city / Stony Creek, there was a lot of little truck route links, and if you're making a delivery, you're still allowed to use a route so long as it's the shortest path. So the philosophy was try and make the truck route network, the permissive network, simpler, a nice grid, stick to the grid, and then take the shortest path to your delivery. So that's kind of why that cul-de-sac would have been removed. And there was a lot of stakeholder engagement around that to see which routes made sense, which ones were kind of redundant. So I don't know whether Steve has anything else to add or if you have specific routes, but that's the general philosophy.
Through the chair, just to concur, is really to remove redundancies, and if it's within an industrial area, then those would be permitted through those areas.
Thank you. Councillor?
Excellent, thank you. And so just to follow up then, if a property was located on a street that had been previously allocated as a truck route, was about to be removed from the official truck route plan, they would still have access under the guise of a local delivery scheme. That component would still allow for uninterrupted flow of truck traffic to and from locations in those areas. Through you, Madam Chair.
Through the chair, that's correct. Nobody is denied access.
Thank you.
Thank you. And my question's been already asked by colleagues, so I'm removing myself from the speakers list. That exhausts our speakers list. So it's been moved and seconded and available for vote now. That carries 11-0. Moving on. Thank you, colleagues. That brings us to motions. Just a heads up to Councillor Pauls and Councillor Wilson, who both had indicated, no, Councillor Wilson had a motion. Councillor Pauls had a question. Sorry, my apologies. Just a reminder for myself. 12.1, improvements to Hampton Park, 28 Lupin Avenue in Ward 6. Councillor Jackson, may you please introduce your motion?
Thank you, Chair Nan. I'd be delighted to. Moved by myself, seconded by Ward 5 Councillor Matt Francis. Improvements to Hampton Park, Ward 6. Whereas the play structures at the park have become worn out, whereas a new Hampton Park Citizens Committee has been established and is working with my office to support and inform improvements to Hampton Park. And whereas these community amenities, Chair Nan, are valuable recreation opportunities for children, youth, and families within the Hampton Heights neighborhood and the greater Ward 6 community. And whereas this project will be added to the Parks and Cemeteries work plan with community engagement for the play structure replacement commencing this year, therefore be it resolved, A, that replacement of the existing play structures at Hampton Park in Ward 6 at a cost of $250,000, including contingency, to be funded from my special capital reinvestment reserve, number noted, be approved. And B, that the mayor, city clerk authorized, directed to approve, execute any and all required agreements, documents in relation to the replacement of the play structure at Hampton Park with such terms and conditions satisfactory to the city solicitor. And Chair Nan, just quickly, I want to say some huge thank yous to Elsie McIntosh, always for her guidance procedurally and with the wordsmithing of my motions. I want to also thank and mention the new chair of the Hampton Park Citizens Committee, Catherine Gaspati. I've been working with her and about 12 members of her committee over the last year. This is, if you will, a new rendition of the committee from the original one of the 90s. And I want to thank, of course, Parks Manager Kara Bunn and Special Project Manager Andrea McDonald for their efforts in helping me with this motion. They've met on site with me over the last year as well. If you notice, Chair Nan, this is not impacting anyone else's, any other ward budget. This is not impacting the overall global budget for 2023, as I've earmarked some special capital reinvestment reserves that council's approved for this particular park. And I know there's excitement in that neighborhood for hopefully the hopeful approval today and ratification at council. Seconded by Councillor Francis. Thank you, Chair Nan.
Thank you. Nobody's on the speakers list, so it's been moved and seconded for committee's approval. Thank you, and that carries. At this time, I need to relinquish the chair to Vice Chair Pauls in order to introduce my motion. Thank you. Through you, Chair. This item is moved by myself and seconded by Ward 1 Councillor Maureen Wilson. And it is in relation to the Bernie Custis, Bernie Morelli shared grounds at 1089 King Street East in Ward 3. And whereas report PW 2208 respecting the berms at the Bernie Morelli Recreation Center and Bernie Custis Secondary School, Joint City Hamilton Wentworth District School Board report was received at the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board Liaison Subcommittee meeting on September 12th, 2022. And whereas HWDSB staff have confirmed that they have authority to cover $32,000 or 50% of the funds required to remove the berms. And whereas the city does not have a funding source to cover the remaining 50% at $32,500, and whereas removal of these berms would enable the green space between the two facilities to be more conducive to multi-use outdoor activity that would benefit student physical activity, physical education throughout the school year, and enable diverse programming for all ages in the summer from the recreation center. Therefore, be it resolved that the berm removal project for Bernie Morelli Rec Center and Bernie Custis Secondary School, located at 1089 King Street East, Hamilton, be funded from the Ward 3 Capital Discretionary Account 3302109300 at an upset limit, including contingencies not to exceed $32,500. Be approved, and B, that staff be authorized and directed to enter into a cost-sharing agreement with the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board to confirm the conditions of the funding, the removal of the berms, and the ongoing maintenance at Bernie Morelli Rec Center and Bernie Custis Secondary School, located at 1089 King Street East in Hamilton. And C, that the mayor and the city clerk be authorized and directed to approve and execute any and all required agreements and ancillary documents in relation to the removal of the berms at Bernie Morelli Recreation Center and Bernie Custis Secondary School located at 1089 King Street East, Hamilton, with such terms and conditions satisfactory to the city solicitor. And through you, Chair, this is a long time coming. It's kind of a cleanup after what many people predicted to be a barrier to student activity in the green space. It also speaks to the need for proactive coordination between the municipality and the school board as it relates to shared lands such as these ones. There is the stadium precinct agreement, which does give many high school students the opportunity to practice football and engage in physical activity at the stadium. It also includes an agreement that will eventually enable students to use the future Brightside Park as well. However, if you walk the area, you know it's a pretty far away to get to Brightside Neighborhood Park, which is yet to be constructed. And in the meantime, we have an inequity for Bernie Custis secondary students and unable to use adequate outdoor space for their physical education. And on the other side of it, as a ward councillor whose child benefits from participating occasionally in Camp Kadaka, I know that some of the kiddos, although they love the berms, that would also enable multi-use programming in that green space as well. So it's for committee's approval. However, a lot of consultation, a lot of feedback from Ward 3 residents and families, a much needed change to the space. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And I think Councillor Danko might have a conflict here.
Thank you. Sorry I missed this at the beginning. Glad you're finally going to get rid of these berms. I have a non-disqualifying interest. I have no pecuniary interest, but my wife is currently the chair of the Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. And now we have Councillor Beattie.
Thank you, Chair. And through you, I happen to be a part of the school board when this school was being designed, so I remember seeing the early plans. I just have two questions, but I'll front load that by saying I'm entirely supportive of the motion and will be supporting it. My question would generally be just out of curiosity or for the benefit of those watching that may have questions as to the cost sharing agreement. Why are we doing a 50-50 split? Knowing that the majority of the lands on which Bernie Custis School is located, and in fact, the majority of the physical footprint of the school is actually on city-owned lands, not school board lands. There could be some confusion there, but I just want to clarify that it is. Is that what's playing a role in this cost sharing? That basically, my understanding would be that the area here at the back of that horseshoe shape, that's all city-owned land anyways, and so that may be what is leading us to having this cost-sharing agreement with the school board.
I'd be happy to answer.
Yes, Councillor.
Thank you. So Councillor Beattie, is the question just to clarify why the city isn't paying for all of it or why the school board isn't paying for all of it?
Either or.
Okay. So my understanding, Councillor Beattie, through you, Chair, is that because it is city-owned lands leased to Hamilton Wentworth District School Board, the request is to facilitate the use of the green space through the school year to benefit the population of the school body, while also benefits recreation programming. So it isn't solely a change for Hamilton Wentworth District School Board. It's also a change that facilitates city recreation programming as well. However, if the staff want to add anything to that, please do.
Through the chair, Acting Director of Environmental Services, Cynthia Graham. The summary of the situation is accurate. The lands on which we're discussing are city-owned, but will be used by the population, the students at Bernie Custis Secondary School in order to facilitate gym classes and sports practices.
Thank you for that. Councillor Beattie?
I do have a follow-up question. During the design, and through you, Chair, during the design process, sometimes we force upon groups, organizations, such as our local school boards, to put in features like these berms for whatever reason, and then we find out that they're not practical later on. And I'm wondering, I'm asking the question aloud and perhaps you can steer it. Is there a better way to do this when we are in these early design phases instead of adding features that we then have to turn around and remove? I don't know how to direct the question.
So,
Chair.
Councillor, thank you for that question. Who would like to answer? Staff or anyone? Okay, Cynthia?
Yeah, through the chair. I think many of us at this table weren't necessarily part of the coordinated design. However, I would suggest that there was quite a bit of staff working with the school board in order to inform the design, knowing it was city property. So I think with all best intentions, those berms were placed there for gathering, for hanging out as a design feature. You know, in future design considerations, we would certainly look to past practices and learn lessons from what has happened in the past.
Thank you. Councillor Beatty, another question? I know Councillor Nan would like to respond as well.
For sure. I'm just going to respond really quickly and thank you for that. It would strike me that at some point it would be beneficial that we make sure that we're not insisting on design that we're going to be removing later, but just occurred to me that there was intended to be an outdoor stage, and you probably remember that there was going to be an outdoor stage at that, and perhaps the berms played into some kind of an amphitheater or something of that. My memory eludes me. But looking forward, I think it would be beneficial that we make sure we're not asking for things that we end up asking to remove later.
That's a good idea. And I think Councillor Nan.
Sure. Happy to respond in terms of my own inquiry and finding some historical, like what happened that brought us here. And it was my understanding that the school board's original plans for the high school included a recreational facility on the rooftop. And when the lands were designed in terms of the city-owned lands, some of that information may not have filtered into what then, i.e. the school board did not receive the funding that they had originally requested from the Ministry of Education. That then really required redesigning of the facility and its adjacent lands. However, that conversation did not trickle down. That said, I think with the liaison committee and the commitment going forward between the school board and the city, absolutely better coordination moving forward to ensure we're not wasting public resources and public funds.
Thank you very much. And we'll call the question now, or you want to take over the chair? Well, okay, anybody else? Okay, we'll call the question. Okay. And it passes, and you have the chair back. Thank you.
Thank you, and with thanks to staff for helping find a solution to that one, as well as school board trustee Felix Miller in Ward 3 as well. So we are at, I guess, Councillor Wilson, did you want to pursue the motion for direction to staff? Sorry? Make that 14.2 versus motions? Go ahead, Councillor Wilson.
Thank you. I think Elsie McIntosh may have it, and if she could put it on the screen, I would appreciate that very much. The motion, a short agenda, but you recall it came out of Hamilton Clean and Green or something like that. That staff be requested to report to Public Works Committee the annual amount expended on litter collection across the city outside of regularly scheduled efforts by Waste Management, including reporting on what factors inform the planning and scheduling of public litter collection efforts in public spaces across the city of Hamilton by the end of 2023. It's moved by myself, trolling for a seconder if I can get it.
So it's been duly moved and seconded. Any discussion, colleagues? Seeing none, it's for committee to approve. That carries. Thank you. Colleagues, any other notices of motion? Seeing none, then we do have general information and other business. First up is 14.1, amendments to the outstanding business list, and then 14.2, Councillor Pauls, you had an outstanding item that you want to discuss with staff in the meeting. So 14.1, do we need a, yes. Mover and seconder to please put forward the amendments to the outstanding business list. Councillor Spatafora, thank you. Seconded by Councillor A. Wilson, thank you. Any discussion on the OBL? Councillor Wilson on the speakers list.
Thank you, Chair Nan. If I could, through you to Director Field. Director Field, if you could remind me in under the OBL item B.A, traffic calming management policy, a proposed new date of Q3 2023. Is that the policy to inform when the city deems a traffic management investment necessary? I just need a reminder. Thank you very much.
Director.
Through the chair to the councillor, this is, we presented a traffic calming policy a number of years ago, and it was tabled by Public Works Committee pending some consultation with councillors to enable some changes. In the meantime, we have published the Complete Streets guideline and done some other work that is in alignment with what this policy was trying to do. So we have worked on or planning to work on reconstructing it to bring it back. And this informs or explains how when we get traffic calming requests from residents or from councillors, what we do with them and how we action and plan those, evaluate, action and plan them. So that's what that report has to do with.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other speakers on the OBL? Seeing none, it is before committee for approval, the amendments. That carries. Thank you. And Councillor Pauls, you had other business you wanted to raise. Questions to staff?
Yes, considering we had a delegate, Lindsay, talking about her frustration about King Street, about all the commotion, all the things we're doing, I just want to ask, how do we communicate to the public all this?
The changes to King Street and Main Street specifically, yes. Councillor? Okay.
To all public.
Thank you. Over to your director.
Through the chair to the councillor, for the changes on Main Street and King Street, we issued a number of updates to committee and council through the beginning planning stages into incremental ones through implementation. We also actively send those communications out to the media and the public at the same time. So we, on the King Street, Main Street, we communicated to council and public very frequently.
Okay, can you remind, even for new councillor, when we had bus lanes, what year was it and how long did it last? And then it was taken out. Can you, when we had the bus lane.
The dedicated bus lane, councillor, on King Street?
Yeah, what year was that? 1846.
Maybe perhaps the original ones. And then there was a very short-lived pilot on King Street prior to the 2018 term. Yeah, Director Cousin Heath.
Through you, Chair, respectfully, Acting Director Mike Fields and myself were not here at the time that there was that short pilot. And as today is Director Soldo's last day, he is not with us on this call to refer to specifically. So we would like to refer back
I guess we got Councillor Jackson that was
Yeah.
here, so I wasn't here.
Historically, you can always default to me, any members of council, if you need to. Anyways, if I might, Chair Nan?
Yes, you
What I
may.
do recall is, I'm going to guess about 7, 8 years ago, and it lasted definitely only 6 months. So Councillor Pauls, thank you.
Why was it taken out? Did we have consultation with the public?
Counselor, so you're adding a business or a line of questioning, which I appreciate, and Counselor Jackson, I really appreciate your historical references. However, I will say as chair of the committee, given that it is an extended item to the agenda, I want to give staff the opportunity to get you the information that you're seeking. Perhaps you can put it in the form of an email of a list of questions that staff can respond to you directly.
And I just want to ask one question, maybe for traffic, you would know. She said something, Lindsay, she said she used to go 50 kilometers per hour straight, going back home. The flow was wonderful. And now the flow is 10 kilometers per hour, 20. Can that, we're talking about climate change. I noticed there's so much more congestion everywhere. Was that looked at?
Over to staff.
Through the chair to the councillor, I'll return to the objectives of Main and King. They were primarily for safety enhancement. So we implemented a number of things to improve the safe operation of that corridor, particularly for vulnerable road users. With that, the section of roadway that's received the bus lanes had an average speed of 70 kilometers an hour. Those are the speeds in which vehicles were driving through that section. So providing traffic calming, obviously to reduce the vehicle speeds, to have them more in compliant, which is a safer state of things, is something that we've achieved within that corridor. And of course, from an environmental standpoint, we can talk about the idle time of vehicles, but obviously putting priority to transit vehicles and buses, promotes people getting out of the cars and taking transit because it's easier for them, because there's prioritization of buses within that corridor.
Thank you. And I know we're having a meeting, I think next week, talking about this. So I'll ask all the questions then. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor. And is there any other business that committee members would like to discuss? Good. Moving on, then, we have adjournment. May I please have a mover and seconder to adjourn? Councillor Spatafora, seconded by Councillor A. Wilson. To adjourn this January Public Works Committee meeting. Big thank you to staff and clerks for preparation of all the reports and considerations for the committee. As always, thank you to the public for viewing, and thank you, colleagues, for a quick meeting.